I don't believe in having one prescriptive playbook when you buy a company because of human behavior. And I've learned that the hard way. Coming from large Fortune 500 companies, you have a playbook and there's a lot of assumptions. But I told my team that there's one thing that we're not going to be doing is we're not going to be telling them the solutions without fully understanding the issues. Inquire first, then conclude. Let's take our time about understanding the issues so that we are able to pinpoint the right issues and not just the noise.
Welcome to the Lay of the Land podcast, where we are exploring what people are building in Cleveland and throughout Northeast Ohio. I am your host, Jeffrey Stern, and today I had the real pleasure of speaking with Sanjay Singh, a thoughtful strategist, seasoned executive, and business philosopher whose journey to leading the iconic Cleveland brand of Mace Security and whose reflections on it are truly remarkable. Sanjay's story weaves together a deep appreciation for manufacturing, a career shaped by curiosity, resilience, and getting good at doing very hard things, and ultimately a personal philosophy grounded in introspection and in presence. From navigating activist shareholders during a turnaround at Mace, to developing frameworks on fear, on ego, inquiry, and deep intuition, Sanjay offers a unique lens into what it means to lead with vulnerability and intention. This conversation waxes more philosophical than most Lay of the Land episodes, a consequence of Sanjay's clarity of thought, deep presence, and his reflections on consciousness and awareness. His perspective on leadership elevate the discussion far beyond the business realm, offering thoughtful insights for both work and life alike. Sanjay also serves on the boards of Magnet, whose story was shared by Ethan Karp in episode 139, and the Nature Center at Shaker Lakes. He's also married to Erin Singh, CEO of Options Naturopathic, who joined us on episode 147 of Lay of the Land to share her own journey. Sanjay is a real student of the world, of people, and of business, and it was a ton of fun for me to try and distill the many conversations he and I have had about his perspective into this one here today. So please enjoy this wonderful conversation with Sanjay Singh. Lay of the Land is brought to you and is proudly sponsored by Roundstone Insurance. Headquartered in Rocky River, Ohio, Roundstone shares Lay of the Land's same passion for bold ideas and lasting impact from our community's entrepreneurs, innovators, and leaders. Since 2005, Roundstone has pioneered a self-funded captive health insurance model that delivers robust savings for small and medium-sized businesses. They are part of the solution to rising healthcare costs, helping employers offer affordable, high-quality care while driving job creation and economic growth throughout Northeast Ohio. Like many of the voices featured on Lay of the Land, including Roundstone's founder and CEO Mike Schroeder, Roundstone believes entrepreneurship, innovation, and community to be the cornerstones of progress. To learn more about how Roundstone is transforming employee health benefits by empowering employers to save thousands in per-employee, per-year healthcare costs, please visit RoundstoneInsurance.com. Roundstone Insurance, built for entrepreneurs, backed by innovation, committed to Cleveland. You had described your path to me before as unlikely, and I thought that would be a great place to start. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so my parents had me when I was pretty young. I was 9 months old. She was on a train heading to see her in-laws, my grandparents, and she noticed I was wheezing pretty badly. And by the time she arrived, they took me to the ER. The doctor said, "Where's the father? This kid is not going to make it." And so my mother would tell me about that. And I would say that they treated me like a fragile, doll when I was growing up. And I went to an all boys school, run mostly by priests from Ireland. It's the same school that my dad went to. And my dad was an athlete. I wanted to play sports. And, it was one of those things where I just couldn't because I had severe asthma. And I still have asthma. It's not as severe. So then I went to my parents and said, look, I want to play sports just like any other kid. I want to swim, play cricket, soccer, tennis. And I remember my mother sat me down and she said, well, my dad was there too. And she said, look, you can't just ignore the fact that, your lungs are weaker than the usual kid, but you got to get good at hard things in life. And if this is the way you want to approach your life, then you better get good at doing the hard things. And that's that that is determination and preparation and things like that. So I started playing sports, and I mean, I'd fall sick probably 3, 4 times a year. I'd be out for like 5 days. Like, those days you didn't have inhalers and stuff like that. You had to take a steroid shot, and I'd be out for a few days with wheezing and lack of sleep. So that is something that growing up, it was kind of brought up quite a lot.
Yep.
And like, wow, this kid is here, and he almost wasn't here. So I've shared that with a few people, but uh, maybe that's what you're recalling. But I
Yeah.
was
Eh,
also to Australia for my graduate school, and then the last minute, my father kind of insisted that I come to the States, and so that was sort of a whoop, two different parts of the world, and I ended up in Erie, Pennsylvania, very different from sunny Australia. So
Yeah. How old were you when you made that transition?
I was 26.
Wow. And at that point in time, did you have an inclination of what it is that you might want to do?
Yeah, I did. So I've always been pretty good at maths. I was thought I'd be an investment banker. So I'd go back, do investment banking in New Delhi or Mumbai, whatever. But then I got a co-op opportunity at GE, and that changed my life in the sense that I fell in love with manufacturing.
Hmm.
Yeah, and then I changed my pathway there, and that's how I ended up working for a few manufacturing companies.
What was it about manufacturing?
It's stuff, it's how stuff is made. It's things that you see every day and you don't even think about, like where was it sourced from? How is it made? How is it polished? And just it was just like so new and interesting to me. I'd never seen it that way. I mean, I'd been to factories before, my dad's employer, but I just had a different view of it. Yeah, and my co-op opportunity was to analyze inventory, and also I was in a procurement function, so that also gave me a completely different sensibility about how stuff has to be acquired in a very economic fashion, and all the stuff that goes behind all of that, and a deep appreciation for that.
Hmm. So with the found interest in manufacturing, how would you describe the evolution of your career over time?
Yeah, so I started out in accounting, working for a chartered accounting firm, and then I decided that that was not my thing, doing audits all year long. And frankly, my dad was pretty worried about me because I changed course a couple of times, and I did very well in school, and he said, "What's going on with you?" I just couldn't figure out what I truly wanted, I guess. But after I came to the States, I worked for a few large companies, Fortune 500. That's what brought me to Cleveland, Stanley Black and Decker, and started out in the finance world. Cost accounting. Did that for just a short time. Controllership, short time. Then became a divisional finance head for Stanley. Then did the whole CFO route. Then left public company. Got recruited by a family office fund out of Boston to be the CFO of one of their portfolio companies in Middleburg Heights. Did that for many years, and that was a turnaround situation. They were losing money, and they brought me in to kind of put the Stanley discipline in. And then I did Riverside private equity gig in Louisiana, and then another private company in Kentucky, and came back to run a family-owned company in Cleveland. So Aaron and I moved back about 13 years ago.
Hmm. And I know, because we've essentially done it before, that we could really talk deeply about all the things that you built through those companies, and we certainly can. But I know underlying all of that is this very intentional system of frameworks and strategic approach to decision making that get more at the why and how of those chapters. And so I'd love to just introduce, at least one of those now as we kind of weave it into the conversation. But if there was one that seems to have permeated everything that you do, it is the framework of fear that we've discussed before. And so I'd love for you to just kind of introduce that concept and, maybe more at a high level, just how you think about frameworks generally.
Yeah, so I like frameworks. I like to tear apart things and kind of certainly explore it with myself, with other people. So if I think of success, being a former athlete, I still play sports. It's like, okay, it's all about an event or a project or a venture that you set a goal, you prepare, and you either fail or succeed. But you don't need to have success all the time either, because you can learn something from your failure that might even compound tremendously. And I think a huge success for me, I feel, was even landing at Stanley Black and Decker, and a giant corporation, very well run at the time, former GE executive. I loved my stint there, got an appreciation for structure, and I got promoted fairly quickly, which also I wasn't expecting that. I mean, but I worked really hard. So a framework that I think about is, especially around business, is that it's every business has a few salient sort of drivers, and it's about figuring that out. And some might be pretty common, like culture or things like that, but certainly companies that are successful over a 50, 60, 70-year time frame, things change, and the markets change, the nuances of the demand sort of change, how it is delivered changes. So you have to have the openness to be able to kind of look at your business differently. So that's one of the models that I think about. I think with regards to my kids, family, Aaron and I, took us 5 years before our first eldest was born. So we had a little bit of time to think about what our parental framework would be. So, and we agreed that we wouldn't have the concept of timeout, or we would treat our kids and empower them, and kind of have the sense of self. And a lot of work that Aaron, my wife, does as a naturopathic doctor around disease is around sense of self. And so having that concept with our children, and I would say they're 13 and 10, and they do have a pretty good sense of self. They're mischievous like kids, but the sense of self really shows up. Like, we were at a farewell dinner last night, and Aaron was away, and there were three college-going kids, and one of the kids is going away to Germany, and he's sort of become like an older brother type figure to my 13-year-old son. And he was going about and teasing them and asking them about stats. And these were graduates of St. Ed's. And he took a crack at them and he said, "Well, I'm going to camp at St. Ignatius." So there. It was just fun to see that. And I was just observing him and I'm like, wow, that is so cool to see him with, older boys being that way. Then also with regards to that whole framework around fear, it's something. It's a 25-year plus journey of kind of learning and shaping my thinking around that. But the concept kind of boils down to this, and this is not my thesis. This has been carried down by different, teachers, spiritual teachers, that when we are fearful, and I'm talking about a mental state, an emotional state, not talking not talking about physical fear. We we are conditioned by our past. So something bad happens, we remember it, we store it, and we expect the same thing to happen. And like I was just networking with an individual. He's a senior executive at a local company, and he was telling me that he thinks he's going to get fired. And I was saying, well, but you haven't been fired yet. Um, why don't you go to your boss with a plan and a workable plan if you think your performance is not up to par. But he was just like consumed by it. That's all he was talking about was, I'm going to get fired. What should I do? Help me network. Help me. Can you introduce me to people? And then if you think of the other way we get affected is and it's another loop, is about the future. And we're thinking about the future, and we can really work ourselves up to, stress, anxiety, all of that. But it hasn't happened yet. But if we look in the present, then it doesn't exist. It's just our reaction is accurate. Our not taking away our reaction, that's totally accurate. And so the idea when you're working with a team, in a corporate setting, you're working with a colleague, it's highly unlikely, unless you have a long relationship, that you actually even know your teammates really well. Because most of us have our masks on. We have pride, we have our insecurities, and we're not going to reveal it unless there is an authentic connection where there is no hierarchy between two people. I think when two people communicate, there's a subconscious hierarchy that develops because, you and I are speaking, but you're the one asking questions, and I'm kind of, there's a little bit of a hierarchy. I'd like to ask you questions, but I'm not going to. It's yours. So unless there's an authentic sort of connection where you can break down that hierarchy, then you really get to know somebody, because then you're coming from a really, I call it an egoless place. It's like formless, it's egoless. And it goes back to the whole concept of, being present, the one consciousness, being conscious of the unconsciousness, being present. That does require to let go of the ego. It's not about me, it's about the truth. What is the truth in a situation?
Yeah. I mean, a lot to pull on there. We could, and maybe the way to do it will be to ground it in practice. So maybe here we introduce the story of Mace, because that's the story through which I think I first learned about, a lot of your frameworks as it relates to like vulnerability as the leveler of hierarchy, and some of these concepts around how you become more aware of your own conditioning, relative to in the present moment, as you were just alluding to. But I think the story of Mace is pretty fascinating. If you were to tell, I think, a lot of Clevelanders that Mace, this brand with massive name recognition in self-defense, pepper spray, I think is what most people know it for, is based here in Cleveland. I'm not sure most of them would know that to be the case, which is often the that's the theme of a lot of this podcast is there's awesome stuff that's going on here that more should know about. But the story is pretty fascinating. You talked about your dad and overcoming hard things, a lot of hard things as part of that journey. But I think it would be awesome to just kind of go through it in as much detail as you're comfortable getting into, just the story of Mace.
Yeah, so the story of Mace is interesting. It all started when I, went to my partner at the time. We're not partners anymore, and we launched, a fund, and him being the capital provider, and I'd be the sort of the operator, if you will. So we did like a passive investment in a LP in a boutique private equity firm owned company. It's in the bottling space, and then that led to I found out through my network that a local fund, they were looking to divest to sell their interest in Mace. I think they owned at the time 54% of the shares of Mace, and I brought that idea to my partner, and he's a sales marketing person, so he got really excited about the brand name and being pretty significant brand in terms of name, but the company was small and public. And then I put together my thesis, and I think there were two things that really drew my attention, and certainly I wasn't super confident about it. Like on my
Yeah.
own, I wouldn't have done it. And the two things were the company was undercapitalized, and number two, we had been told we had interviewed, part of our diligence process, we had interviewed the board members, and they brought up the idea that there was an activist out there. Well, neither of us had dealt with an activist. I mean, we're private, company folks. We can turn that thing around and be laser focused. So those things I certainly had in my background. I was on the board, and then 2 years into my tenure, I was asked to chair the board. I joined the management team, and that was at the beginning of COVID. So I remember talking to the team about, wow, stores are about to close, and Mace was mostly retail at the time. They sold to retailers like Dick's, Walmart, AutoZone. So we launched, revamped an e-commerce sort of strategy, and the company was losing money at the time. So we didn't have a ton of capital. So we started really small on Mace.com and on Amazon, and I hired an expert. I interviewed several people, hired a local firm, fantastic. You may even know him. His name is Drew Kramer. He's a local entrepreneur, very sharp
Yeah.
guy. And he then they were the outside agency helping us, and I told them that we're not dipping our toes. This is like we're playing to win. And then so that worked out well uh, unfortunately because of the George Floyd protests, our demand just went up. So we went from losing money to having 9 quarters of fantastic earnings. Everybody was, frothing the mouth and very happy. And then we started seeing the post-COVID, too much inventory, bloated inventory sort of playing out. And small companies have a high break-even point. You have a 20% drop, and I mean, you're in the red because you can't trim hundreds and hundreds of people. It's just not
Right.
there. Yeah. So during that process, when things got a little tight, and having I think in a small company, what one of the insights is, we talk about allocation of capital. There's allocation of focus and working on the right stuff. When you have a small public company, and at one point our CEO was gone, so I had taken over his responsibilities. I'm spending a ton of time, preparing for board meetings, investor meetings, outside, activists, shareholders, they have their, requests, things like that.
Yeah.
And I mean, I was working 7 days a week. And I remember my wife came to me and she's like, "Is this worth it?" And so we finally decided to take the company to market. I think we should have probably done it sooner. Um, Nobody can anticipate how tough things can get. So I'm not talking about being an astrologer and saying, "Oh yeah, 2 years from now, what demand, you know, interest rates have been rising." Nobody could have predicted when those would have stabilized. So in hindsight, I think we should have, when we were at our peak, we should have found another partner that had deep pockets and kind of moved on. It would have added a lot of value for the shareholders at the time. But that's in hindsight. And this is purely my opinion. It's not the former board members or anyone like that. It's just like I was inside the company. So when I look back, that's what I think about. I personally, I also realized that I, I optimize much better with sort of a deeper, like a team that has depth. The team is pretty small. It's a small company, small team. So I was involved in a lot of little things that when I look back, I go, "Oh my God!" Like I've literally never done that kind of stuff before. But looking back, that's the other thing that I realized once I was inside the company, that there's a lot of little things.
Yeah. Well, how then did you think about allocation of focus?
So I decided that when the calls came from outside shareholders, and we had, like, I would say the last 2 years of my tenure, it was quite a lot, and there were attacks and there were insults and there was shaming, and I mean all of it. But my internal check was that I would go through a sort of a self-coaching during. I meditate every day, and I do that in the morning. And I'd ask myself if I'm doing everything I can to, in my sort of capability and power, to do what I can for the benefit of the company. And I'm not going to get into a mud pile with these folks. I'm not going to get distracted. When sales were slowing down, we launched 5 new ventures, and it was all about, okay, if organic is slowing down, find new channels, new co-branding sort of ventures. And that was my framework. So I was not going to get into and get defensive, and just it's a waste of energy. And it's not easy when you're being insulted and being disrespected and lots of other things going on. It's not easy. But I also did a gut check, with my board. I do a gut check with them. Do you think we need to make a change? I'm happy to step down. Things like that, and those were good conversations as well. But I think if I look back, in summary, undercapitalized, small public company, that's just way too much risk. It doesn't matter what the brand name is. Here's the thing, Jeff. The thing with the brand name is you got to you got to spend money to have the brand be present, like ads, and shareholders would say, "Why aren't why aren't you on TV?" Well, you should have the money to be on TV.
What did you see as the opportunity?
The opportunity was the very high gross margins, relatively speaking, in the 40s. The brand presence, for sure. So 50% of our people who landed on our site would type in Mace and they would show up on our site. So 50% organic search. I mean, that's like unheard of. But the thing is, you still have to be, if say somebody types in pepper spray, they might go to a competitor site because they've got the first ranking on Google. And they were outspending us like by 5 times, 6 times, even at our peak. I mean, we peaked in early 21 or mid 21 revenue wise. And if you look back in the last 10 years or so, and at that time we were spending a pretty decent amount of money on on ad spend, but in the last 2 years, it was down substantially because demand was. We just couldn't afford it.
So through the acquisition, I mean, how did you go about trying to bridge this gap between, where the market was valuing the company and what you felt and or maybe knew, its intrinsic value to be? What's the dynamic of the exit of Mace?
Yeah. So the exit of Mace was in late December 24, and we were about 18 months in the process. It took forever. And I think if there's one lesson that I would take from that is it's the number of people that showed up, initially weren't the right buyers. I mean, not even in the right sort of segment, if you will. I mean, just because people have capital doesn't mean that, they're the right buyer. And then as time went along, the numbers weren't that great. So then the buyer pool gets super limited. So in hindsight, we should have probably looked at selling the company to get a pretty nice valuation in probably around our peak time. That would have been ideal in hindsight. Now, at that time, it looked like it was going to go higher. So there was cynicism like, no, this can go higher. Um, great lesson there. Great lesson there. So when we bought the company, in terms of the intrinsic value, we valued it. A partner and I looked at it as it sold for X price. This is kind of what the valuation is, and that had been the share price for many, many months. I think the value that we paid, and our exit was going to be at a profitable EBITDA. And it was an OTC stock, so you can't predict the stock price of an OTC thinly traded stock. But our view was, if it's profitable, 2 times revenue for a brand name company like this would not be that hard to attain.
So I want to reintroduce some of the frameworks. One of the stories that you had mentioned to me before that I'd love for you to share is the corduroy pants over the holidays. And it was in the spirit of kind of vulnerability as an equalizer. Because through all this, in what is, I think, a difficult situation, it sounds like really the whole way through. I like all the interim bits of the frameworks that you carried with you through it.
Yeah, so I was I was walking the plant, and I knew I had to go to a Christmas thing that evening. So I thought I'd just go from the office, whatever. So I was wearing a pant with some red and green. It was like a dark blue pair of corduroy pants, and my plant foreman, he came up to me. He's like, "Wow, that's pretty cool." And again, it was a little atypical to wear to work, but I was just being practical. My day was, my days were pretty long at the time. So, and he says, "Yeah, that looks really nice on you." And I said, "Yeah, you like it?" And he says, "Yeah." It's like, "Okay, what's your waist size?" And he tells me, and that night I was shopping for it, and Aaron was like, "What are you doing? You already have a pair." And I told him I'm getting it for him, and he was, and I gave it to him in private, and he really, yeah, he was very surprised, and he was touched.
Yeah, I don't exactly, but that stuck with me.
Very loyal person through all of the turmoil, just handled things very, very well. I have a soft corner for people who have great intent and they take action. It's not just words. And he would deliver. He would do his best. Yep.
Why do you think you find yourself drawn to kind of turn around situations, and what do you think is required to do the very difficult thing of turning a company around?
I'm just I'm drawn to hard stuff, but I'm done with that now. Um, so I think I think it because it was part of my childhood, and you know what did the Zen teachings about suffering are? We suffer because we're unconscious. It's to make us conscious. We don't have to suffer. And I think I was attracted to suffering because I was pretty unconscious and I had to learn my lessons, and I learned them, and I was humbled by them, and I learned a lot. Gosh, I learned a lot over the course of my career. Um, but I think that when Aaron asked me if it was worth it, and I'm in a Vistage group, and they asked me like, "You're always trying, are you trying to prove something here?" No, I really looked at that pretty hard. I'm like, no, I don't like the duality of I'm right, you're wrong. I
Mm-hmm.
don't like the duality of success and failure. Everything has to be a success. And I like the I like the concept of being decent, being kind, being of service, being present, and that is just super fabulous for me.
So no more hard things
Until it happens.
until it happens. Well, to pull on hard things, because I'm just very curious about it. I mean, one angle here is capital, and obviously you've dealt with outside capital, perhaps even adversarially. But also, I know in your journey that there have been situations where you personally are the sponsor, where you've put your own capital and money on the line, and so ultimately that means that if it doesn't work out, you are subject to both the downside and the upside. And how you think about balancing risk and your personal conviction.
So that one was the personally sort of funding Mace. I I looked at it as like the highest incentive to make sure that the sale happened. So I did take a ton of risk, and I'm I would say I am a person who takes risks, but I do try and figure out how I can protect my downside. So I'm not like super cautious. I do a lot of private investing, and these are with people who are very smart. I co-invest. I trust them. But once I get to know them and I trust them, then I'm happy to invest, and the returns have been pretty decent. And so in terms of risk that way in business, I think personally I used to take a lot more risks. I have a motorcycle, and I've been in a motorcycle accident. I've been in an automobile accident where I'm lucky to be alive. But I like the speed, and I think these days when I look at my kids, I don't ride my motorcycle as much. It's I'd be lucky if I get a ride my motorcycle about 10 times a year or something, because I don't take it everywhere. I just go on very specific roads where I know I can. I'm not going to get hit by somebody to the best of my ability.
What would you say are the main lessons for turning a company around? What are the ingredients that are required to make that successful?
Yeah, so when I ran this other privately held company on the east side of Cleveland for many years, we acquired our competitor. I wasn't from the industry. People in the industry, people in my company said, "Don't buy them. It's not a great shop." But we could not convert a, a very large customer of theirs located in Solon, and they would buy their tooling from this company in Chicago. And our, our folks, our sales team was not able to convert them. And so when the opportunity came up, we acquired them. They were losing money. And I remember telling my team, I used to go up to Chicago frequently, and I don't believe in having one prescriptive playbook when you buy a company because of human behavior, and I've learned that the hard way. Coming from large Fortune 500 companies, you have a playbook, and there's a lot of assumptions. Now, it's very useful to have a structure, your onboarding culture, all that. But I told my team that there's one thing that we're not going to be doing is we're not going to be telling them the solutions without fully understanding the issues. Inquire first, then conclude. And let's take our time about understanding the issues so that we are able to pinpoint the right issues and not just the noise. And we did that. And they went from a negative 3% EBITDA to like 20s. It was just an amazing turnaround. So that did involve a lot of attention. So it did require a lot of communication. I think sitting from afar is hard, and especially if you're competitors. And I remember when we went there day one. So the deal was going to be announced on a Monday to the folks in the plant. They just had one plant, and the owner and I went through a script that Sunday night. And when she showed up to the plant, she had me by her side and a couple of other people from my team, and she said, "Here's so and so, and they have acquired the company, and I thank you for all your efforts." And she turns it over to me, and that wasn't the script. And I just saw the look of horror on people's faces, and I had to tell them, I said, look, business continues as usual, no changes. And we had no personal changes except one person, unfortunately, was very sick, passed away. But I mean, there was the same group of people were producing amazing results. It's amazing when you have that framework where you're able to work with other human beings and sort of be part of the solution as a team. It's amazing.
How do you approach inquiry?
That's a great question. I was just talking about it with a friend of mine from Vistage. So I've been practicing, and I'm still a student, so I don't think I've mastered it, but I practice the Socratic method of inquiry. So again, being a student of the idea of one consciousness, of having that formless, egoless presence, and extending that to inquiry means that you are searching for the truth and not just, I found the answer, you found the answer, you're right, I'm wrong. Just find the truth. And the truth is, whatever the deeper issue is in business. So, and that might involve a lot of questions until you sort of get, down to the core.
How do you balance that pursuit of finding the truth with what I've heard you call deep intuition about things, where you maybe don't know, but ultimately there is this tension between like things that you know and then things that you feel maybe are correct, and when to follow one of those or over the other?
So I have a framework around that. So you have intellect, our ability to think, then you have instinct, what we call our gut instinct. But it's an instinct. We may get it wrong. But intuition is no thought. It's sensing something. And like I met my wife on a Monday, and by Sunday I asked her to marry me. And I remember when I asked her, when the words were coming out, I was like, "Oh my God, what am I saying?" That's what was happening in my mind. It was more about what is she gonna think? Like, is this guy a lunatic? But and we've been together 20 years, and that is one instance of it. Just there was a sense, there was something, there was a sense, and there have been other instances where I've sensed something and said, "Okay, let's go." Even with investments, like co-investments, like I partnered with this one person, and it's turned out to be just fine. I didn't overthink it. No, the thing is, in that framework, you have to allow to have that deep intuition, and that requires surrender of control. So it's exactly the opposite. It's the control is the dark side of deep intuition, and sometimes it's a false sense of control or a momentary sense of control. So I think to balance that, part of the meditation is about that, is just kind of feeling, trying to be in that state and reminding yourself throughout the day to kind of try and be in that egoless sort of state. It's not easy at all.
No.
No, I mean, you go about your day, and it's like things come up and you got to make a decision, and that requires intellect, and that requires you looking at data and that you're concluding something, and so on and so forth. But I think it's a it's a practice that's why I said I'm a student. It's a practice that I follow through, but it's very useful when I am asked to give advice, as a board advisor, or in my Vistage group when I'm asked for advice and things like that. That's when I feel really that can really come and play.
Is there advice you find yourself giving most often?
There is that's a great question. So I feel like I have two two types of two groups of people that I come across. A group that is somewhat interested in the cosmos and the mystical. They're a bit mystical. Maybe they've done some hard things. Maybe they've learned it. They have the knowledge of consciousness. They're aware of it. They've explored it. There are others who haven't, and I think for them, it is so far off about surrender and acceptance. It's like, wait a minute, Sanjay, you're so competitive. What are you talking about? Well, I'm competitive on a tennis court. I don't need to compete with a drunk driver and be enraged. But so I think that's what I find myself is that when I'll ask people if they are aware of this concept, and if they're aware, that I kind of know that it's a far-ranging sort of very higher level sort of strategic meaning conversation versus maybe a little bit more tactical if people are looking for advice on very something they can implement. So I try to get that out of the way, if I'm put in that spot. But generally speaking, no, it sort of varies. Like I think the one thing that comes up a lot is that the framework around fear. So my wife said to me 2 years ago that she said, "This is your superpower. You should do something with it." And she, of course, is my wife. She's biased. And I was like, I don't know what to do with it. She's like, "Well, you should share it with other people so they can maybe look at it differently." So after I got done with the Mace thing, so that does come up when I might be talking to someone and sense something, and I'll ask them like, what's your inner tension? And then they'll go, "Oh, I'm struggling with this." And more often there are words like, anxiety, stress, but they're all versions of fear. I mean, they're all, variations of intensity of fear. So I end up sharing that framework around fear and maybe asking them to explore it and look at it maybe a different way. It's not easy, of course. It's not easy at all.
What do you wish more people understood about fear?
That it doesn't exist in the present moment.
Yeah.
And I think another comment on that would be being aware of our unconscious state. So things that just kind of happen and we're not conscious. So that's what I call we're reacting to things. And maybe just taking that moment between what did Viktor Frankl say? The space between thought and reaction is being in that space. And I think it's very easy to be reactive, but I think with practice you just get better. You become more aware.
So you're in this place now, maybe to borrow your words, maybe on the other side of suffering or, an avoidance of hard things, and taking the time to reflect and explore opportunities, and driven more by your curiosity than by schedules. That was another thing that I wanted to talk about, was just the scheduleless concept. But what do you find yourself curious about right now? Like how is this intentional openness about exploring ideas just influence what you think you're going to do next, professionally and personally?
So whatever I do next will show up. It'll find me. Yeah. I think I truly believe that. And it's probably going to look more like, board advisory work. What I did, when I, was running Mace, I was also on the board of another company out of Syracuse. And I worked with the team, and that was very fulfilling. So I would love to do that again. And I used a lot of my mental, models here to do that. What I'm really enjoying is just observing. So my daughter, my 10-year-old daughter might be drawing and I just watch her doing her thing, or my son writing or reading, just being around the kids a lot more, just observing. It's just such a gift to be able to do that. And they're children are teachers. They teach you. And so that's very interesting to me. I've been spending a lot of time with current and former Vistage members who've been in transition, kind of like me, and we're exploring each other, sort of, what the plans are. Like I met with a Vistage member yesterday, and he was saying to me, "Well, I'm going to take the next 6 months before I jump into anything." And I'm like, "Why six? I mean, why does it have to be six? Is like the seventh month like a problem?" But just things like that, like then when I want other people to call that out when I'm exploring things as well. But what I am very curious about is the whole neuroscience of how the mind works, how thought, how the brain is organized. That hack I told you about, where I removed everything from my calendar, like my tasks, that is, meditation, blah blah blah. And then I saw my energy change, because I think when you have something on your calendar and your your brain is using up energy way before that, because you're thinking about it.
Yeah, it's in anticipation.
It's an anticipation, and it may be something that is a bit uncomfortable. You don't want to do it, but you got to do it, sort of thing. And so when I removed it, except for meetings, I it's amazing. Like it just feels a lot lighter. My brain seems to be a lot clearer. So I'm very curious about. I'm reading a different book, Steven Pinker, folks like that around the brain.
What does success mean to you? How do you think about what kind of impact you hope to have looking back?
So success to me is sort of, venture driven. So if I'm running a company, it's profitable, it's meeting its numbers, things like that. I think for me in life, it's about feeling, blissful. So it's neither like super happy, because if you're happy, you're going to be sad as well, but sort of, just being sort of neutral and blissful. I don't feel like that the idea of success has to do with, a few indicators anymore. Um, Kind of been there, done that, enjoyed it, crashed a couple of times, learned some pretty significant lessons, which I look at those lessons as those learnings as immense successes, because that has that that has made me conscious of my unconsciousness, and all that suffering, and being attacked by that activist, and all of that taught me a lot.
How do you think about entrepreneurship in Cleveland?
It's, you look around, like in my Vistage group, or even in my wife's EO groups. I mean, it's amazing that Cleveland has amazing talent. There's an infrastructure of risk capital, so that's amazing. The Ohio Fund that you're involved in, watching the opening of that Eagle Electronics. Oh my word, that's just absolutely amazing. I think there's I find Cleveland, the people in Cleveland, that they're down to earth, they're sports crazy. They're down to earth, but they're resilient. My goodness. And this is my second stint in Cleveland. We were gone for a few years. Just the restaurant scene, the music scene, the cultural scene, it's just lovely.
There, there certainly is a resilience. It's undeniable. Is there something? I mean, I'm sure there is, but is there something particularly important that we haven't really touched on that you were hoping I would ask you about, or that you want to talk about?
When I went from public company to private, I sought that out. And I think, when I look back, and my peers at the time now have done very, very, very well. I have no regrets. But I sometimes wonder, like, did I do the right things? But the thing that I keep on going back to is that when you're in a large company, you get the advantage of the infrastructure, structure. You have your, well done playbooks and models, financial models, and I was in the finance area, and those are amazing tools. But when it comes to having a having a more significant role to make an impact, I don't think that exists in every large company, unless these companies have a way of kind of spotting talent. Like I'm an introvert by nature, and I'm apolitical by nature. So I'm going to say what I mean, sort of thing. And I I was fortunate that I just started doing some of the hard stuff at the division that I worked for, and I got promoted. But I wonder if how some of these companies are organized. Are they able to kind of vet that out and give people some chances? Not every Fortune 500 company is entrepreneurial. It just these companies are too big to be like that. So
Right.
I found the experience in private companies. I really loved it. Where, hey, you see something, go fix it. You have an idea, let's go explore it. Just don't just don't bankrupt the company, but so I love that the mind expansion and at the speed of decision making. I love that a lot.
Do you think it's possible for big companies to cultivate that at all? Or is it just a consequence of that size that it just becomes difficult?
So the CEO of NVIDIA said something really interesting. I was just reading about this the other day. He said the large companies are like a racing car, and the CEO should know how to drive the racing car. And attention to details, so knowing things at a certain level. And now he's been with NVIDIA for a long time, right? So he has that advantage as you build it up, and now it's valued at whatever over $1 trillion. But I wonder how an incoming CEO of a very large company, with 10,000 plus employees, how would they go about, even figuring that out while also managing the the demands of shareholders and the board and
Yeah,
all that. Yeah.
they don't know how to drive that car.
Right. Right.
Yeah, very interesting. Well, Sanjay, I just want to thank you for coming on, sharing some of your thoughts and reflections. I always love hearing them, so I appreciate it very much.
Yeah. Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
I will ask our traditional closing question, which is for a hidden gem in Cleveland.
Yeah. Yeah. So there, a few come to my mind. One is the Nature Center at Shaker Lakes. It's just a paradise. And we live right by it. We walk around it, we bike around it, we see all these beautiful birds, and it's just amazing. And the Nature Center itself is, and I'm a bit biased, I'm on their board. And next year we should get you out to their fundraiser. They have an annual fundraiser. It's absolutely stunning. Great food, music. It's quite amazing. Then so that comes to my mind. A particular restaurant that I've been taking my kids to since they were little. It's in Ohio City, and I particularly like the owner's energy. It's a restaurant called Johnny Mango, and the owner is JT. When I see him, he approaches us, he talks to my kids, and he always has a smile on his face. It's like I want to eat there every week. We typically eat there every weekend because somebody that joyful, is providing you food. That's just amazing.
Love it.
And the the other one, I've been spending a lot of time in my wife's business. I'm providing some strategic advice, and I've been going to her office, which is she's about to hire a new employee, and this woman said, your office space is like a spa. And I'm like, yeah. And so I asked Erin, I'm like, how did you go about designing this space? And she just has such a nice flow to that space. So I would say that's a hidden gem. Again, I'm biased. It's her clinic option, I think. But yeah, I got real nice appreciation when this prospective new employee, made that comment. Another one that comes to my mind, I mean, I didn't know this, but Cleveland has the second oldest Montessori school in the U.S.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, called Roughing Montessori, and boy, it's one heck of a school. My kids go to school there now. My son's last year, but the teachers, it's very, very good school. Like my kids love going to school there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I did not know about that one. That's awesome. Very cool. Well, thank you for sharing those.
Yeah, of course.
If folks had anything they wanted to follow up about, where would you point them online? What's the best place for folks to learn more or inquire?
LinkedIn, my first and last name. Just do a search.
Easy. Yeah. Perfect. Cool. Well, thank you, Sanjay.
Well, thank you for having me, Jeff. It's great to be here.
Absolutely.
All right.
That's all for this week. Thank you for listening. We'd love to hear your thoughts on today's show, so if you have any feedback, please send over an email to jeffrey@layoftheland.fm or find us on Twitter @podlayoftheland or @sternhefe, JEFE. If you or someone you know would make a good guest for our show, please reach out as well and let us know. And if you enjoy the podcast, please subscribe and leave a review on iTunes or on your preferred podcast player. Your support goes a long way to help us spread the word and continue to bring the Cleveland founders and builders we love having on the show. We'll be back here next week at the same time to map more of the land. The Lay of the Land podcast was developed in collaboration with the Up Company LLC. At the time of this recording, unless otherwise indicated, we do not own equity or other financial interests in the company which appear on this show. All opinions expressed by podcast participants are solely their own and do not reflect the opinions of any entity which employs us. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon as a basis for investment decisions. Thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you next week.